Thanks everyone, and thank you for connecting us. Good to have everybody on the panel. Hope everybody's keeping safe and healthy and thriving in chaos, as they say. But good to have everybody here. So I think just maybe before we start, maybe it'll be good if you guys can just do a 30-second introduction about what your role in the organization is and what the organization is. It'll be good. So I don't want to do bad justice to try to introduce you guys. So maybe if you guys can just spend 30 seconds doing that, that'll be great. And we can start with Tanmay.
Tanmay, you are on mute.
You're on mute. Yeah.
Yes, sure. So Spencer's has supermarkets, and it also I run. We also have a Nicom, which is.
You're breaking up a lot. I don't know whether this is a connectivity issue at your end or my end. Is everybody finding that he's breaking up a bit?
Yes, I think Tanmay is breaking up.
Okay, why don't Pramod, you think, let me reset the.
Sure. So Pramod, why don't you start? Tanmay, maybe you want to log off and log back on.
Okay. So I'm Pramod Gupta. I'm CFO of Arvind Fashions. In addition to my CFO role, I also handle supply chain and IT. Arvind Fashion is a lifestyle powerhouse in India. We have brands like US Polo, Arrow, Tommy Hilfiger, Flying Machine, and Calvin Klein. We also have the beauty chain Sephora, and then we also have a value retail format called Unlimited, apart from a few other brands. I have been with the company for the last 2 years. Prior to that, I have been with Microsoft, Novartis, and HUL, and also a short stint in a startup. So a few different experiences around.
Oh, fantastic, and big role here, both having supply chain, IT, and CFO. So clearly a lot of work at your end. Girdhar, you want to go next?
Hi, my name is Girdhar Chitlangia. I am the CFO at More Retail Limited. I'm practically with this company since the beginning. We are currently running over 720 stores. We are in the business of food and grocery retailing, as most of you would know. I'm a chartered accountant by profession. I worked in Russia, Dubai, Delhi, a mix of startups, finally ending up at More, where I'm here for almost 13 years.
When were you in Russia?
96 to 2000.
Oh wow! So we overlapped then. I was also in Russia that time. 93 to 99. I was based there with first with ITC, then with Revlon.
Okay. So Revlon, then possibly we have a connection. So we'll catch up separately.
Sure. Absolutely. Next, just trying to see who else is there. Anand.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anand Agarwal. I am the CFO for V-Mart Retail. I'm a CACS. Have been working with V-Mart now close to 4 years, but have been with retail with the experience of more than 20 years, having worked with Reebok as well as Hindustan Times in their education retail venture. Prior to that, in fact, I had a technology startup at the beginning of my career, having set up one of India's first ISP, in North India. I'm a technology enthusiast and love to do finance.
Oh wow, very interesting. I'm just trying to see if Tanmay is back. Meenakshi, did he come back? Am I missing anybody else?
Tanmay sir is not yet in.
And you only 5 of us, right? That's it?
Yes, we'll try and trace him. In the meanwhile, you can start the conversation.
Sure. So I think thank you guys for your introductions. Obviously, a very high level of work experience and a lot of right across industries, countries, markets. So great to have everybody here. I just start with Pramod. We can start with you. I think, and we sort of 4 or 5 questions I wanted to discuss today. Just looking at this whole thing on thriving in chaos. What are some of the things that businesses have had to do during this time? What are some of the challenges they faced? So just start with you. What are some of the top 2 or 3 challenges that you faced in your business over the last 1 year? I'm sure there were many more. And what have you done what did the business do to overcome these?
Yeah, I think obviously the challenges would be many more, and the challenges would also be while there is a commonality at a certain level, but there are also specificity. When we move from one organization to the other organization, I think for us the topmost thing was that when the lockdown happened, that was the time when we were in the midst of fundraise. Our rights issue was just going to go live on 27th of March. And the lockdown happened on 25th of March, and therefore, our rights issue got postponed. And we didn't even know at that point in time when and whether and all those questions. And plus also later on in July, as everybody got to know, we had tied up with Flipkart for one of JVs for our brands, which also apart from the future it will secure, apart from the fact that it will secure the future, it was also bringing in certain amount of funds. So therefore, for us, the biggest impact was that our funds virtually dried up, and then therefore, and we were in the midst of the fundraise, and we had just got listed a year back as an independent company. So it had a very significant financial impact for us in terms of funds availability. The second thing that was there, and I just restrict it to two because there are many other areas that my colleagues can cover. Is that on one hand, you had to take a lot of actions on operating side as well as, on these two strategic, activities that we were talking about. We had to suddenly get into a lockdown. People had to work from home. Many people were not able to work at all. Many people went to their, their
hometowns or villages. Yeah.
So work expanded significantly while the resources went down significantly. So therefore, I think that was a tough period, and that was also the time when you are looking for safety and security of your people. People are looking for greater clarity around, what's going to happen, etc. While you don't have clarity to begin with. How does the top management give clarity when there is a lack of clarity all around? So I think the way to sort of deal with that was to get absolute control over cash. I have never done the day-to-day cash management the way at a level that I did in those 4-5 months. So very, very deep management of cash, because cash was king, and especially for an organization like ours, which was in the middle of fundraise and strategic actions, it was very, very significant. So therefore, that was one. And the second thing was that, how do you keep your head down, do a multiple level of small and, one-to-one or small group conversations with your employees, board, vendors, customers, all of those things, and keep focused on the work that needs to get done. And the fact is that, and then also spend your time and energy behind technology, because we knew that even after the lockdown opens, you have to have a way of being able to reach your customers in an online way, or because stores are not going to open that quickly, and people are not going to come back to the stores very quickly. So therefore, keep your head down, do the one-on-one conversation, keep focused on the day-to-day management of cash, and also keep on progressing the strategic initiatives. The fact is that we did manage to complete our Flipkart joint venture also, and which we announced on 9th of July when the lockdown was just about happening. And we also completed our rights issue in the course of July 2020 itself. So keep your focus on, keep the conversations going, manage the manage the emotions as well as the well-being of your extended ecosystem, and keep your own motivation going. I guess that's the first and foremost important thing.
Phenomenal. That must be really trial by fire. Yeah. Just like 5 days before, on your fundraise, and then the JV. And this JV is for what? For which brands? Is for specifically for
our Flying Machine, where we have where Flipkart has come in with a significant minority stake. So we put in our Flying Machine brand into a JV in which Flipkart and us are partners.
Okay. And they have exclusive distribution rights on that then? Or it will go through?
Therefore, the JV manages. So
okay,
therefore,
fine,
on the online front, they are our preferred partners. But otherwise, the stores continue to be managed. And it's a joint venture. So therefore.
Okay, perfect. So thanks. Firstly, Tanmay is back. So Tanmay, good to have you back. So we're just going to start through the questions. So I'll let you listen in, and then. So Anand, just back to you as well. Top one or two challenges during this COVID times. I'm sure like everybody's got a few hundred of them, but just top one or two. And how did you address those for your business?
I think uncertainty, managing expectations in that spate of uncertainty for all these stakeholders was extremely challenging. While there would be, multiple instances where significant efforts in handling specific situations would have gone, but I think more around the biggest asset of the organization, managing people, whether it was employees or vendors, or even the community at large in terms of customers. I think that is where the bulk of our efforts went in. Keeping them engaged, keeping adequate cash and the assurances flowing in every time, so that there is a visibility and there is also an assurance that the business is continuing, and we have a significant stake with them for the future, is something which kept the organization going. As Pramod was mentioning, cash is king, cash is the only reality, and therefore liquidity is the topmost priority. So I think once you have strong visibility on how you are able to see the cash flows coming in, that really improves the confidence of the entire ecosystem around you. And to that extent, I think in that spate of 4 to 5 months, the biggest effort that we did was around ensuring that we had good visibility around cash. We were able to reduce our working capital deployment by almost 40%. We increased our working capital lines by almost 50% just at the start of the the lockdown, and that sort of gave us that extra lease of life and visibility that we will be able to sail through this situation, at least not getting so much impacted. So that really helped. Apart from the starting up and accelerating the digital push, because it became very clear that this uncertainty is not going to end in 1 or 2 months. So more ecosystem that can be built around deployment of technology in all spaces and spheres of the organization is only going to help build up the capability and the efficiency of the organization in the long run, while keeping the near-term objectives very much afloat. So that was how we sort of handled this altogether.
Phenomenal. Yeah, I have to say, retailers did such a phenomenal job of keeping people and resources and everybody intact during this time. Girdhar, I'll come to you now. Same, one or two top challenges, and talk briefly about the people equation, because I think people are such an important element for your businesses. What did you do with all the store staff during this time, and the warehouse staff and the logistics staff? What was the play with them? And so just over to you, Girdhar. Can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. So yes, I think cash is a common theme, and I think everyone can talk at length. Okay, same for more. We tried to manage cash, and like Pramod said, I mean, never manage cash at that level. Okay, every rupee coming and going important. Okay, how much can we push the vendors to get more credit? More important. Okay, and everywhere else basically. You see, being in the food and services, food and grocery retailing, we were also labeled as essential services. So for us, most important was to try and make sure to keep the stores running. Number one. Number two, keep the stores with stocks also. So as the pandemic set in, most of the supply chain was broken. I mean, across the companies had product, but there was no one to carry the product. So for us, it was important that we built a reverse supply chain. We went to the doorsteps of the companies. We picked up as much as possible. Obviously, we carry a huge assortment, but companies themselves actually narrowed down their production to very few key SKUs. That also, I would say, that helped in the short term, because we knew exactly what is selling, and frankly, all that was available was also selling. So that was not a challenge.
Consumers were not being very, very picky that time, right?
Yeah. I mean, the beggars can't be choosers. Exactly. Yeah. So that was true for the entire value chain, I would say. Okay. Your question on people, we followed the government guidelines as stringently as possible. Of course, we incentivize people to take safe transport to come to the stores. We followed all the protocols, both at the DCs and at the stores. We had good attendance. Wherever there was no local staff available, we actually asked people not to come to the stores because taking a public transport or of whatever is available was very risky. So we managed in that manner. Safety of the stores, the people, the customer, all those were of paramount, importance for us. We put together a lot of SOPs and processes to ensure that those happened.
Fantastic. I think hats off to all of you for, thanks to all the retailers and especially the food and grocery retailers, but others as well, just keeping things going. Tanmay, coming to you, you cut off, so maybe a quick brief introduction about yourself, your role at Spencer's, and then how challenging was it for you guys, because you had just acquired Nature's Basket, trying to tweak it, and then all the hell breaks loose. So maybe briefly your top 2-3 challenges faced by you as well. Can't hear you.
Spencer's has all formats, right? It has hypermarkets, supermarkets. We have dailies. If you look at in terms of assortment that Spencer's dealing, it is FMCG, FNV, FNM, electronics, and then apparel and general merchandise. So it's a whole gamut of things. And then you have Nature's Basket, like you said, which is completely a gourmet food retailing. And we have an omni-channel brand, subsidiary, which is omni-channel retail. So, the beauty and the challenge of this whole was that every part was behaving differently. So I would really put it in two buckets. One, just like everybody said, every day, the leadership being on call and firefighting the issues of the day, right? And which is on people, vendor, supplies, and literally, figuring out how to keep a store open, right? Because there were variety of things happening, variety of dictates. So that was, I think many of us would have done. But second, we literally got into a kind of a monthly planning mode for like 4 or 5 months. I remember doing a monthly plan for rolling to the next 6 months, like every month, because every part of our business was behaving very differently. So, think of food and grocery, which in which Staples had a dream run, right? Benefiting from the shortage in the market. It was like massive growth happening in that part of business in the pandemic. And there was a lot of demand. FMCG, first month we had supply issues like Girdhar mentioned, and but then quickly the demand came back because there are a lot of, particularly in the food side of things. Fresh, you had a completely different challenge because that's a lot of it is requires a localized supply, and that's a very different behavior. Consumer durables behaved very differently because there you think your completely new set of things have emerged in terms of demand, right? So figuring what you get, how do you sell, it had to be completely different because people who are working work from home, the things that they require were very different. And local sales have gone down, local player sales have gone down. There was this whole challenge, suddenly China imports getting affected, so the spares getting affected, and therefore consumer durables had its own dynamics, and larger brands were the ones which were doing well. So again, we literally had to, therefore, as a large player, had to juggle so many balls, getting into a monthly mode to run. But having said that, crux of it was always to make sure that you conserve cash. What can you do on inventories? What can you do on cost? And get the supplies back. I think what worked for us, since you're asking, I think we not only helped reach out to our employees where we and like many, we are organized their travel to office and going back, retailers association, or I worked in a restaurant before, so I reached out to NRAI, and we really were hiring people because we really needed people at that point of time, given that there were constraints being felt by employees all across. So for us, leveraging the entire ecosystem helped a lot. Vendor system, vendor supplying to vendor, reaching out to vendor, picking their inventories helped a lot. And then, working hyper local, engaging with communities, tie-ups with RWAs, and trying to, service the areas around store, work helped a lot. So those were 2-3 things I would say really helped us during those 3-4 months of peak, particularly.
Fantastic. I mean, really, I'm sure it's a learning for everybody, and everybody's written a nice book on this in terms of how to perform in a pandemic, right? Because this is exactly the mother of all situations. So Pramod, I'll come back to you. Then we'll start from there, and maybe just what do you think is some of the technology enablement that you guys did at Arvind, and how did you make that whole thing work? Because you have so many different brands, different formats. What was the role of that technology played during this period? And did you guys up your technology investments and all? Because at a time there was a cash flow pressure as well. Or did you just make do with the existing technology? What were the thoughts on that? Pramod, can't hear you. You're on mute.
Okay.
Sure.
So see, the thing is that even as I think if you look at CFO, CEO, or the C-suite, one of the most important things that you need to do is your resource allocation. And just because there is a crisis today, though you don't, completely get so soaked into the crisis that you don't think about the future at all. And it was very, very apparent that as the lockdown opens, you have to have an omni play. We do feel that, within, let's say, the multi-brand kind of organizations which are end-to-end, we did have some earlier technology investments, like we have our own website now.com, which is multi-brand for all our internal brands. But what we did was a few things around our omni-channel play, where the inventories across even our MBO customers, our own stores, our warehouses, the entire visibility of inventory, discoverability of the inventory, and also like you can have an omni play, but when let's say a customer orders to you, then one of the most important thing for you is to determine that where will that order go, how will it get fulfilled, and how will the entire chain have a visibility of whom to service, from where to service, and how to service. Yeah. So that entire area was the one where we worked enormous amount. We did enormous amount of work even during the lockdown. And of course, people were working from different cities, different ways. People had to get used to, working in a lot more collaborative, offline, online collaborative manner. We have been historically a much more physical organization, and therefore, and suddenly at a less than a week's notice, everything goes, online, yeah. And people have to work from home, from different cities and all. Therefore, in terms of enabling the organization to work and collaborate in a multi-city, different kind of time frames, we had to even work on strengthening, the capabilities of people to be able to sort of access, the central systems and so on and so forth. And we sort of built in capabilities where let's say individuals could discover the stores in their vicinity and in their catchment area, and then enable scheduling of appointments with our store staff being able to go and sort of deliver at the customer's place and so on and so forth. So therefore, fair amount of work happened on technology side, which is at the front end. Just 3 months before the lockdown happened, we had just gone for an ERP refresh. So therefore, there was a fair amount of work we had to do on settling down. So in some ways, while obviously it was disruption, but also it was positive for us because there were no transactions taking place.
Yeah, so at least you had a chance to embed the ERP nicely, right?
So therefore, it enabled us to do a lot of work, without having to worry about how do I take care of the transaction load. So I think 3 things, if I was to sort of go back and summarize. One is that it got the organization ready for remote working and, remote collaboration. Number 2, the whole omni piece, not only in terms of discoverability of the inventory, but also the fulfillment piece. And the third thing is that it enabled us to fix our ERP. And of course, I mean, it also created a few issues like, you have to suddenly go omni and very significant amount of marketplace. So you can do the fulfillment, but the back end in terms of sales posting, collections, debtors. So it also created a few issues which we had to sort out later on.
Thanks. That's very interesting. I mean, again, I was reading an article, and I mean, this guy was saying that 2030 happened in 2020, right? All the companies that were thinking about technology enablement for the next 5-7 years, everybody got it done last year, or at least tried to get something done last year. So,
and you are seeing those cartoons which said the digital transformation, 10% CEO, 8% CIO, and 82% COVID.
Absolutely right. Anand, I'll come to you. Did you guys also put in a lot of technology to enable the whole Omni piece, and then just reflect on this also as you guys answer? Is this sustainable? Is this direct to home and direct to consumer and all of these models, will this survive once things open up, or are we going to go back to the good old days of expecting 90% of our business to come from walk-ins?
Yes and no. I think, see, the industry and the segment of the industry where I come from, V-Mart is a typical value retail fashion apparel player. And we operate, I would not say at the bottom of the pyramid, but, let's say at the, the lower middle of the pyramid, with our average selling prices hovering around 250 rupees. And at that price point, while offering product to the customer is very easy, but getting the customer really to convert and buy online without a touch and feel is extremely challenging. So while we've always been, I would not say always, but definitely been an online Omni player for the last 1.5 years, or we started our Omni journey even 6-7 months before the lockdown. But we are very clear that it is an investment into the future. So it's not that we started this journey just because the lockdown hit us or the pandemic hit us. We are very clear that this is a big disruption waiting to happen, and we don't want to get disrupted, but we would want to disrupt the market with a value offering even in the the online space. And to that extent, we have been building our capabilities in the online channel for quite some time. We are very cognizant that for the next foreseeable future, at least the next 1 or 2 years, maybe our contribution from Omni may not exceed or may not get to a very sizable number. But despite that, we will keep our investments moving. The bigger part, and I would just add to what Pramod was saying, I think the bigger part of doing technology-based investments was more around capability building at the infrastructure level for the rest of the organization. And we use this time very productively in identifying some of the new areas, like implementing RPA in non-finance domains. So we already use, some bits of RPA in the finance domain, but how could we use RPA in other parts of the businesses? How could we, further streamline the supply chain? We already use AI-based replenishment tools, but how can we take it to the next level? So we used all of this time in identifying and in zeroing in on solutions which we would like to implement, and we started that roadmap and the journey, during this phase. So we remain an extremely focused, technology-oriented organization, and again, as we all keep saying, data is the new oil, and technology is just one avenue, which
Absolutely.
allows you to leverage a lot of data. So I think it's a journey, and we use this time quite well to start and embark on this fruitful journey.
Great stuff. Tanmay, I'll come to you. Technology, Spencer's. Are you guys? Did you use this opportunity to invest heavily in technology, and what was the sort of? Is it because there's also a cash flow pressure at that time, right? So you can't go very big on some of the latest things you want to buy. So how did you manage that, and what is the? Is it sustainable? And I'll continue to go on that journey to drive Omni.
So there are two approaches, right? Number one is the long-term move towards Omni and e-com. And while we had our app or our website, etc., we have invested in optimizing, improving significantly our omni-channel, or the online sales have trebled, right? So over this period. So therefore, that clearly is an area of business where we know that's the direction in which the consumer is moving, and therefore we are investing there. And we we put significant investments in upgrading the app experience or the online platform, etc., etc. All of those existed, but clearly, like everybody, we've done that, and we continue to work on it. As far as therefore sustainability or the move towards it is concerned, I will. Everybody is figuring what is the right e-com model, right? Because everybody is depending on your average bill values, the products you sell. The economics of it is very different. Now, therefore, we think that yes, direct to consumer is a trend that will continue, but But other than e-commerce, I think the other piece that is and local hyper-local reach and food deliveries are doing extremely well for us, and we continue to engage with customers in the neighborhood, and where we are investing now in technology as well. We didn't do then because that was something that we actually started only in January, very luckily so actually, because the pandemic hit in March, and we were moving in that direction, and that kind of was helpful, but is now the next big lever for us, because that one we think is a more sustainable. Being a physical retail player, for us, using stores as a hubs, we are able to therefore reach out to consumers and service, which is a far more viable equation we find versus pure play online where delivery costs tend to be.
Absolutely. Once you have a footprint, it makes no sense to have a stores. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. So we like 49 cities, 200 stores. For us, it does. We can just leverage our footprint. So that's the path we are on. Now, so that's the longer term part that you asked. As far as short term is concerned, I think like everyone, other than figuring how everybody can work from home and figuring, other quick fixes on technology, I think little bits of technology really helped, right? So we got into those chatbot ordering or a WhatsApp ordering, where when you're going to hyper local, that kind of enabled, there are a lot of videos around how the store managers were showing the customers the aisle on WhatsApp video and demonstrating the products and connecting with them and helping them out. So yes, technology came to use in many small ways as well, right? So things like these that I'm speaking about were a big help at that time when you were working day to day to service your consumers and come to their and help them out. So that was the short term of it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Looks like great progress, and I think everybody has taken this time to do that. So Girdhar, coming to you, how is it that you guys leverage, because you and Spencer's pretty much in the same space, food and groceries, a big chunk of your business. How did you leverage technology? Did you also look at a D2C model, or just put technology to get product on shelf? Just some thoughts on that, and what is the future looking like for you?
You see, a large network retail is also a quasi-technology company, I would say. Okay, I mean, without technology, this kind of retail network, replenishment, customer satisfaction, putting the product on the shelf is not possible. So, frankly, before the pandemic, we were running 600 stores. Now we are running 700 stores. Okay, so during this period, we opened almost 100 stores. So we had a technology backbone which was well set. We initiated our, the BCP in the first week of March. Okay, at that time, possibly, arranging laptops and arranging VPN connections. Those were the important ones. Once those was done, frankly, we didn't face really any challenges. Like Tanmay said, of course, at the local level, we had phone line, online and offline, all kind of retailing happening. Okay, the store manager with his close network of customers was managing on WhatsApp and so many things. Beyond that, we of course fine-tuned some of our processes to. One of the points that I would make, any CFO or anyone in the company always thought, when will I become paperless? Yeah, that was a dream for most of the people. In the last 9 months, perhaps, we have neither signed an agreement nor seen a paper. We truly become paperless. Like you said, 2030 came in 2020, and a lot of the effort was put in by, because this is a group of CFOs, I would compliment ourselves for this.
True. And actually, yeah, you're right. So, I mean, no contracts were signed, no people were met, yet businesses continued. You open 100 new stores. I mean, that alone is a big achievement, right? I mean, that alone is a case study of, I know food and grocery was privileged because this was the only channel that was allowed to be open and continuously, at least not getting bothered by the government. But having said that, to take aggressive stances in that time is phenomenal. So again, I think this is great. Maybe the next set of questions we can just talk about, or even the audience is coming back. How many today, if you take your 700 stores, how many have returned back to full operation now? And give them, maybe go back with you only this time. And what percentage of your business is online today versus offline? Where was it pre-COVID and what is it today? And what does it look like? Is it going to change dramatically for food and grocery as well, do you think? Just because of cost of delivery being so high, etc.
So the last question I will answer first, whether it is going to change significantly in the future or it is going to stay like this. I think there is a big shift in consumer shopping, even in food and grocery. A lot of people are buying online. At the low, stores were running at 65% capacity. As we speak, we are at about 95%. There are still some local level restrictions. So some stores have to shut down early or whatever those cases are. Sales, I would say we run different kinds of businesses. But for the food and grocery business, our sales is more than the pre-COVID level, I would say.
And you said that you're saying the consumer behavior is changing, that they are going to continually buy more and more online. You think that's the way?
Yeah, more and more. I would not say online, more and more in an omni-channel way, basically. So it could be on a WhatsApp, it could be on a phone call, it could be online. All three of them.
Okay. Pramod, coming to you, your category is slightly different and more about. It's more fashion. It's more. It's less impulse, maybe. But some category parts may be impulse. But how are you seeing it from an omni perspective? What percentage of your stores are today operational, and what percentage are what are the numbers pre-COVID to today? And what does future look like to you from a technology perspective?
See, the thing is that in any case, I mean, now 100% of the stores are open. I mean, there are some times when some localized restrictions come in. Like the other day, we must have read in newspapers that Amravati has gone on a lockdown from now till 1st of March, etc. And unlike, let's say, food and grocery, our stores in any case don't remain open till very, very late in the evening. So therefore, in terms of store operations, I think by and large we are there. I mean, there is no major issue that needs to get handled over there. And see, the footfalls are less than earlier. They are like around, maybe depending on the area and the format, etc. It would be anywhere between 75 to 85%. But the thing is that what has changed compared to earlier is that there used to be the window shopping has gone down. I think that must be an experience, at least in the fashion retailing and the related, impulse kind of things, where the
average bill values are going up. The
retail values are going up, and therefore, in terms of revenue, it's anywhere, again, depending on the format, from 85%, right up to 100%. Like in our beauty formats, we are actually growing vis-a-vis last year, and some of the categories also growing, vis-a-vis last year. So therefore, it's a mix. But on an average, I think revenue is back at 85-90% level. And footfalls are a little lower than that. The good thing that has happened from, and not only our organization, I'm sure in other organizations also, is that your break-even points have come down in most organizations, and therefore, at these reduced, revenue levels also, the profitability in metrics look a lot better. And
but isn't that only temporary, with malls now going back to pre-COVID rentals and all? Won't you see that come back? I mean, the rent is such a big part of it, right? So, with the rents almost coming to pre-COVID levels, would that get impacted then?
See, I was in another, some last month or so, I was in another, sort of panel discussion. What sort of came out is that all physical stores, for them, since rent is as you rightly say, rent is a significant part of the overall costs, and then therefore, if there is a secular shift that happens to online, and ultimately, the factors of production have to operate in a way that the final output is affordable to the consumers and profitable for the suppliers.
Sure.
And therefore, if we were to see ourselves as, in a wider scheme of things, as suppliers of those pleasures to our customers, In that case, the factors of production have to fall in line with that. So therefore, I'm sure the last word is not said, and then therefore, if there are malls where the retailers can run profitable operations, then they will be affordable. And if they are not affordable, there will be conversations that would be happening, and as indeed they are happening. So therefore, I won't worry too much about the rentals going back. But I think intrinsically, what people have figured out is the overall productivity of operations, overall supply chain innovations, and also the technology piece. So coming back to one of the earlier questions that you had raised, obviously, like the online had become more than 1/3 in the course of Q2 and to some part of Q3 also. As the physical retail opens, I think it is coming down to high 20s, and from here it will continue to grow, probably slightly faster than the offline retail. So maybe if we were to look at just in terms of some crystal ball gauging, 4 to 5 years down the line, at least in our sector, apparel sector, you should be probably looking at late 20s kind of online presence. So some of these footfalls will come back. Some of this will remain. What it has done probably is that there is a step increase that has happened in the online, and after that, and from here on,
it will probably stay there or
and a little bit increase, like maybe over the next 3 to 5 years, there may be 2 to 3 percentage point gains further from now, but it's all crystal ball gauging.
Okay, thank you. Tanmay, coming to you, where do you see your sales come back now versus pre-COVID, and how many stores are open today, and where do you sort of see that part play out from your business, online versus offline?
Largely, we had almost all our stores operations, even at the peak of pandemic, falling in essential commodities. There was a period where we had to cordon off the non-food section and operate the food section because we wanted to operate only the essential piece, and therefore in line with the government guidelines, which was the initial part. Our stores continue to be operational. I think the challenge, like many other panelists said, is the hours restriction, which continues to come in off and on even now, but was good there for good 4 or 5 months at the peak when the issues were. But our stores are operational, and we are opening stores. We added 6-7 stores last quarter, and we continue to be adding stores now. So we are on the growth path. Now, between when we talk of footfalls, I think for us, food side saw a good performance, and I kind of stabilized. It continues to be at par with what it was pre-pandemic. On the non-food side, which is apparel and general merchandise business, I think just like the other panelists from apparel business said, we are continuing to be about 85%-ish of the pre-pandemic levels. So that's part is seeing a month-on-month sequential growth, but is still to reach the normal levels. But we are definitely seeing a growth. And to your point, Rajat, which in terms of number of footfalls, clearly, despite the fact that the sales are close to pre-pandemic levels, there is literally a 20% drop that you would see in footfalls, kind of equating, which is resulting in the ABV going up by that much more because the frequency of people coming on has gone down, and people are stocking up much more. So those are the three, cuts of traffic and store opening and information from our side.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah. And Anand, coming to you, what are some of the things you guys have seen? Because you're a very strong tier 2 player, tier 2 city player. There were some cases very bad restrictions, some cases less restrictions. So just your thoughts on how you guys have handled it, and where are you versus pre-COVID in terms of stores, number of stores, and online versus offline?
So Rajat, I think the experience has been pretty much in line with what the others have shared. The only difference being that, as you rightly said, we are more a tier 2, tier 3 town player. We have more than 270 plus stores, large format stores in most of the the tier 2 and the tier 3 towns. And where one very peculiar thing which we have observed is that while the footfalls have sort of gone down, definitely they have gone down. But we've also seen a spurt in footfalls during occasions to celebrate. So whether it is a a Diwali or a Chhat or a Durga Puja or a strong marriage season, we've seen very strong footfalls coming around that period. But as long as the occasion to celebrate goes away, there's a big lull. And so on an average, while the footfalls have remained in the range of around 70% or so, but despite that, I think the revenues, because of the higher conversion rates and the higher propensity to buy when a customer really walks into a store, has resulted in 80% plus of revenues. So if I look back in the last quarter, I think we achieved almost 84% of revenues versus pre-COVID last year. And as we move forward, January, February, in any case, are very, very lean months. There is no big festival or no occasion. But if I look forward to Holi, which is coming up in March, end of March, I'm very hopeful and optimistic that we will see much higher than previous year footfalls as well as revenue numbers. Now, on a consolidated basis, it might still look like we are still lower than last year, but I think the trend is definitely very clearly on the upside. And as soon as we see more normalcy coming in the minds of people, not so much in the market, but more in the minds of people, that they are fear-free and they want to come out and they want to splurge, I don't think money or the consuming power is a concern.
Okay.
The second aspect on the online, I think, as I said earlier, our audience and the target segment that we sort of address is at the lower end of the price spectrum. And even during COVID times, while we've always been, at least for some time now, we've been an omni player, we did not see a very large traction on the online order conversion. We did see our traffic go up by almost 10 times, but that did not result in our revenues going up by 10 times on the online channel. And as soon as we saw the the stores getting unlocked and the stores getting operational, we saw that traffic also get normalized. So as of now, our revenues from the online space are still less than 1%. We are not a very strong brand player and an online traffic aggregator. And my anticipation is that in the next, probably 2 to 3 years, we might be, very happy if we are able to cross 5 to 10%.
Fantastic. That's good, because your presence is tier 2, and I think that consumer may not be, at least at this stage. Tell some other type of e-commerce, vernacular commerce, or so. Just a quick round of rapid fire. I'll start from Pramod again. One good practice you've seen outside of your business, which you've seen a competitor do. It could be finance related, could be in your funding and funding of operations, could be in the way the cash flow is managed. Just one interesting practice that you could just give an example of. Don't have to name the client company, but something that you looked out for and said maybe something we should adopt. And I'll come to everybody for the same one.
If I was to, there were a few, but if I was to just talk about one, I think there have been people who have been able to create a very good firepower for future, and have been able to sort of do the business tie-ups and snapping up of the businesses, etc., which, if managed well, should stand them in good stead and strengthen their competitive and operational flexibilities.
Okay. Girdhar, coming to you.
So it's a non-finance one. What I have noticed is most companies have moved marketing to digital means. Okay. And I don't think it is going to go back soon to pre-COVID levels in terms of print and, TV, of course, is digital. I think a lot of marketing has moved to digital. There are various means, Instagrams and, leaflets on the phone and everything. So I think that is a good practice, possibly saving millions and millions of dollars of cash for the companies, which straight away goes into the bottom line.
Sure. I have to be careful with that. The latest report, I'll share it with you after this, says that even though digital spending went up by 42% in the last 5 years, I think in the West, the actual customer acquisition only went up by 11%. So there is a big question there. But again, they've already reached a saturated level. You're right.
Yes.
Here it's early days. It'll be interesting to do that. Anand, coming to you.
Rajat, while I would have many experiences to share and many, learnings to share, but definitely one thing which immediately comes to my mind is this thing about data transparency in the ecosystem. And I have no qualms in admitting just as an example, I've seen Amazon share its sales data with all its vendors and also its customers very regularly and, very frequently. You can see the bestsellers for any product, any category, and the vendor is therefore able to analyze why is his product not doing so well in the entire ecosystem. And that is something that I would love to imbibe, where I am able to tell my vendors why I'm not buying so much more of his products because the customers are not liking his product. How do I really build that in the entire supply chain, and to make sure that I always buy the best product from the best vendor, and it gets more competitive and more rewarding even for the customer.
And also creates a healthy competition between vendors as well, right? Because then they have to figure out why is it that I'm not selling. It's not just the retailer's job to sell the product. Tanmay, coming to you, your thoughts on one sort of really good, interesting practice you saw in the industry.
So, outside of industry, and that's an interesting question. So, I think personalization is a trend that is, going to stay, and millennials are used to it. Future generations are going and looking for it more and more. So when I look at medical or banks and they are using this technology to really be able to do personalized selling at consumers' doorstep. The question for brick and mortar retailers is, if that's the trend over a period, how do you really leverage your omni-channel to at least be in line with what the trend is, right? And that's going to be a tough one, and there are so many things happening abroad. But if that's the direction in which I see, and you said some other industries, so I'll pick that, and I say, how do we move towards that? That's a big one.
And that's a great point, because today, if I look at myself as a food and grocery buyer, I go to the Kirana, or my wife goes to the Kirana every week, or the neighborhood stores, buys the product partly online, partly offline. And for you guys, a subscription model where exactly what I need with some level of tweaking can become very effective, right? So that I go through I mean, in the West, it's already happened when I was living in London, or when my kids are living there. They order their standard grocery comes every Monday or Tuesday. It lands on their door. They know when it is, and then they can still tweak the model a bit. So subscription is a great space. So that's part of the personalization thing, right? Knowing what I need, knowing how much I consume. Only thing is, I should be able to share the data with you, and somewhere you should be able to trap that data, right? So it's a good way. Okay, so I think we're coming to the end. Maybe a quick rapid fire from everybody. Just some quick, big sort of one takeaway from COVID, and what you think is going to carry on in the future. And Tanmay, since you're on the screen, start with you first.
Well, COVID has, it's back to basics. I think COVID had taught us to be very, very focused on the fundamentals of having a viable, good, cash generating model. We back to investing in the right businesses. We're investing again, but I think that's the big one, because everybody is now looking for profitable growth and the right business models.
Okay, perfect. Anand?
I think the biggest learning for me has been, about people. You take care of your people, and the people will take care of you. So that's been one big takeaway.
Perfect. Pramod?
Both of the above, and I think one of the things that has taught us as an organization, apart from taking care of people piece, is that collaboration works, and therefore break the silos, focus on, the amount of debates that it sort of removed from that, intellectualization and silos, and people sitting on their respective data. When there is a crisis, then people come together to solve the crisis. And that leaves the lesson of saying that, what was I trying to protect? Yeah. And therefore, when I opened myself to different thoughts and different options, how as an organization, energy was released, and how my function and my business and my brand benefited. I think so. Collaboration is a big learning for us as an organization.
Perfect. Girdhar, coming to you. Last word.
I think resilience across businesses, teams, and functions. The other one is this pandemic has actually taught us to stay true to our businesses, our core strengths. I mean, there are many things which people have actually shut down because that is not core to the business, not able to focus anymore. A lot of learnings, a lot of cost savings among them.
So resilience, we talked about people, talked about cash flow management, and we talked about collaboration. I think those are four very, very important, and they're pretty much the mantra of any business, right? But I think COVID taught everybody to really do it again, because in the whole valuation game and the whole expansion without taking care of what was there, or ignoring people, or just not collaborating. I mean, alliances has been a big learning for all of us, right? Forming alliances outside a comfort zone, whether it's partnering with people for delivery, whether it's partnering people for technology, partnering people for people. Like, I don't know who was mentioning that we were calling the National Restaurant Association to borrow people from there and stuff like that, And I think that kind of stuff, collaboration, came out of it in a lot of ways that people did. And I think that one of the thing is mobile commerce, right? I mean, mobile commerce is here to stay. In the West, it's almost 70% of total e-commerce or online e-commerce buying now. So it's another area which is going to become bigger and bigger as the smartphone becomes a more sort of viable tool with WhatsApp and all the other payment gateways, etc. coming up. So that will be another one to watch out for. I think there are one or two questions. One question from the audience. I'm happy for anybody to take it. What's something you have learned while overcoming this crisis that will happen, that will make you thrive in the next one? So I think my sense is all of these questions are there. Anybody want to take a specific one on that?
I think our summary comments were about that only.
Yeah, our summary comments were about that. I mean, resilience and so on and so forth.
Okay, so one more. How do you think showroom-driven apparel stores need to change in order to future-proof themselves?
I think get more digital. Get more knowledge of digital across the shop floor to appreciate the taste of the customer.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Make especially when it comes to, since we have a little bit of bridge to luxury kind of brands, for differentiate between which stores are more of your fulfillment centers and especially create some experience centers, give visibility of even you can only store this much in the stores. So therefore, how do you make sure that your entire bouquet is available to the customers and not only the brands that are there available physically in the store, and just take care of the safety and security of both your retail employees and the customers.
No, you're spot on. And the other thing is, so all of companies have already started looking at endless aisles in their stores. Even if I keep a small line, I enable it through technology that somebody can come and still browse the collection and see what is there. And the other part is that this report that my colleagues have sent from the US, I'll share it with you after this. It says, in spite of all the doom and gloom about offline retail, 2,700 new stores opened in the US compared to that many were shut in the last 3 years. And for every one chain that shut down, 5 new chains opened up. So offline is even after everything, 85% of sale in the US is offline. And in India, still offline is 97%. So
when TV came in, people said that the cinema halls will go away.
Absolutely.
So they just reinvented themselves from a single screen place where you just go to watch a movie into an experience center where
Absolutely.
you sort of bring together buying and food, beverages. It becomes an experience and a family.
Absolutely. So I think that's all I had. Any other comments, thoughts from anybody, and then we can wrap it up. Maybe we are nearly on the hour.
Well, thank you so much, Rajat. That was a very insightful and very, very learning experience for all of us. So thanks a lot.
No, thank you guys. Very, very exciting and absolutely amazing work all of you have done and your teams on the ground to pull through this crisis, and to see growth coming out of this crisis is a case study on its own. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and good to connect with you. And Tanmay, great seeing you again after a long time. Take care, guys. Stay safe. I'm not sure who's.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.